Hey, thanks everybody for downloading this special edition of Noggin Notes. I'm Jake Wiskerson. I'm the host. Very quickly, the show is sponsored by Zephyr Wellness, my company that I co-own with my co-owner, Lindsay Bell, in Reno and Sparks, Nevada, and also by Audible. Audible is an Amazon company. You can help out the show by going to audibletrial.com/nogginnotes and downloading a free 30-day trial of Audible. It's full of audiobooks, totally unmatched selection, unlike anywhere else on the planet. And you can help us out. So audibletrial.com/nogginnotes. This is just me today, and I'm going to recap what we did last night. I think last night was so special for so many reasons. Here's what we did. We hosted, and when I say we, I mean Zephyr Wellness, hosted at Reno Guns Range, which is a local gun store and indoor shooting range, a mental health training, meaning mental health practitioners could get continuing education units verified by their state licensing boards for learning about guns. And the overall sponsor and coordinator of the program is Walk the Talk America. If you've listened for a while, you've probably heard me interviewing Mike Sodini from Walk the Talk America, and you know what they're about. But if you don't, go to walkthetalkamerica.org or WTTA.org and learn more about them. So here's what we did. We took 11 clinicians and we brought them into Reno Guns Range, and we gave what is essentially a children's, basic intro level course to firearms, what they do, what they are, their history, how to be safe with them. And then we had them fire the guns on the range, and then we talked about it. And it was it ended up being almost 4 hours long. We slated it for 3 hours, and we just went long, but it was really good and it was really rich content. And the comments were amazing. Almost everybody wrote in their reviews of the course, because we all have to do these evaluations at the end to make sure that the course gets credit from the licensing boards. Almost everybody wrote that they enjoyed the shooting experience. They enjoyed learning about specific firearms. And then they wanted more. They wanted more info on the firearms, and they wanted it on, they wanted more range time to be able to shoot a little more, because shooting's fun. If you're not into guns, you should go shoot a gun, just because it's great. It's like saying, you should try sushi. If you've never had sushi before, go try sushi. It's a very unique experience. It's delicious. Almost everybody likes it, unless you got a texture problem. But it's also very unique. So if you're the 52% of Americans who don't own a firearm and don't live with somebody who does, I encourage you to expand your horizons a little bit. And I think that's the idea of what we try to do. I don't think that. I know that's exactly what we try to do. So we're trying to help expand clinicians' understanding of their own competence about what gun culture is. And this is important because, like I said, the statistics vary, but roughly 48-ish% of Americans either own a gun or live with somebody who does. And that statistic comes from a Pew Research poll conducted, I believe, in 2017, fall of 2017. And that's a lot of people. And if we don't know what gun culture is about, and all we know is what the media tell us about, big spooky guns and how certain groups are trying to take them away and other groups are just trying to push them on people, well, then we're not going to get the whole picture. And what's the best way to understand a culture? Immerse yourself in it. So if you've ever studied a language, you've ever traveled abroad, and you've done some cultural immersion, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, if you have an idea about a certain thing, but you've never actually experienced it, you're inevitably going to be very short in your understanding of whatever that thing is. So what's going on right now, for those who may not be aware, in the broader, what we call Second Amendment or 2A community, the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, by the way, is the one that says that the citizen's right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment community, the gun owner community, is largely afraid to come into counseling because they have been told falsely by various outlets that somehow mental health practitioners are going to freak out and pick up the bat phone to the government and have the government take their guns away. And that could not be further from the truth. It is complete malarkey. It is completely fabricated. And it comes from almost nowhere. I won't say nowhere because I know that there are some stories of people who have had their gun rights restricted based on some prior mental health history, but there are some court cases challenging that, and there are some legal efforts underway to make sure that doesn't happen. But we as a clinician community are not good at understanding a lot of cultures, frankly. I mean, the graduate schools that we go through put us through at least one course in cultural competence broadly. You know, it's foundations of cultural understanding, that kind of thing. And usually it centers on four simple things. It's race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender. And outside of that, you can branch off, but that tends to be the quote unquote cultural competence. We don't get too much into disabilities. We don't get too much into poverty or socioeconomic diversity and culture. We definitely, absolutely do not talk about gun culture one iota in graduate school. At least mine and about a dozen others of people who I've run into have all testified that they haven't either. So this is important because we're talking about half of America, which is roughly half the population of the clients we could be treating, either owns a gun or lives with somebody who does. And we don't want, as clinicians, we don't want to be on this side of the fence where somebody comes into therapy and in session they say, yeah, I'm really struggling with my anxiety, and I, my only relief is going out in the desert shooting targets. We don't want to hear that and go, oh my gosh, I have this preconditioned understanding of what guns mean, and they're dangerous and they kill people, and so I think I need to call the authorities because you with your anxiety shouldn't have guns. Like, we really need to not be doing that. Never mind the fact that we have ethical codes that are woven into law in most cases that absolutely prevent us from doing that. That's not an appropriate response to somebody in need. But that very response is, in fact, what is pushing people away from getting treatment. So that's a big deal. So what we did last night was special for a variety of reasons, but chiefly it's because not only are we combating that and we're trying to implement some new knowledge in the minds of the clinicians so that they can respond appropriately when that conversation happens without judgment and without fear and that kind of thing, but because it's, to our knowledge, it's the first time it's ever happened. No one anywhere has ever done such a training to our knowledge. Now, I'm relying on Michael Sodini, who founded Walk the Talk America, and Rob Pincus, who travels the world and has written like 8 or 9 books, and he's got like 2 more in publication, who does firearms training and is former law enforcement, and he's been in the NRA, and now he's active. He's active trying to change the NRA, National Rifle Association, for those of you who don't know. This guy's literally gone around the world training people and all sorts of law enforcement and military personnel. And between the two of them, and then of course me and my little narrow world in Nevada, none of us have ever heard of such a training. And in fact, it's been echoed by clinicians broadly who say, yeah, well, admittedly, we don't know much about guns. We just know what we're told through, news outlets. And then the Second Amendment community has repeatedly said, thank goodness you guys are doing this because it's high time, because a large amount of our people are struggling. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. They're afraid to go into the office because they think that, the clinician's going to judge them. And they're going to lose their ability to have their guns. Now, I don't really care what your opinion is about guns because it doesn't matter. What matters is fact. And the fact is we have a law in our Constitution in this country that guarantees a person's right to own a firearm. And that's it. Like, there are states that have restrictions, and I get all that. But your opinion about it is irrelevant. What matters is that the fact is people own guns. They do things with those guns. And based on that alone, they're afraid to come get care, and as a result, they're living less healthy lives. They're suffering, and in many cases, they're dying. And I'm not talking about just the gun owners who like to collect guns and shoot in the desert and are just working as plumbers and accountants and nurses and school teachers. I'm talking about all of our law enforcement personnel and all of our military personnel. They're afraid to come in to get help because they think that somehow by doing so, they're going to lose the ability to carry that weapon on duty. And that's not okay. And that's a responsibility that the clinicians and the clinical community has to embrace and walk with and carry, so that we stop pushing people away from care. Now, I have a philosophy that says your rights shouldn't be infringed based on some mental illness anyway, and I extrapolate that not only from the gun angle, but I also put it into you shouldn't lose your right to vote because you went to prison. You shouldn't lose your ability to work because you checked the box on the application. I don't think employers should even be asking if you have any mental health treatment history on a job application. I don't think we should be asking whether or not you've been convicted of a felony on a job application. I don't think that stuff's irrelevant. I don't even think that's relevant, because as an employer and as a mental health clinician, I believe in the ever-evolving capacity for people to heal. If I didn't, I should just hang up my license and not practice anymore, because then people would just be permanently stuck wherever they are. That's not why I do what I do. I do what I do because I want people to be able to get better. Now, once they're better, we need to move on and acknowledge them where they are, not where they used to be. So with the gun issue, guns are dangerous. Like, straight up, they're designed to inflict harm upon objects or animals, whether that animal is a four-legged animal or a two-legged animal. And as such, we need to be considering the fact that maybe somebody in a mental health crisis or in a depressed state or is just struggling with life, maybe they just don't need their guns right now. But what we don't need is them being afraid that they're going to be taken from them by an exterior entity like the government or like me as a clinician. I'm not going to go into your house and take your gun. So we can have those conversations with the people who are struggling and say, hey man, maybe it's not the right idea to, have your guns around right now. Can you give them to your brother-in-law, or can you go down to the gun range and put them in a locker for a while until we work through this stuff, the bad divorce or the PTSD that you came back from Afghanistan with, or the PTSD you got from that officer involved shooting last week. Maybe it's just not a good idea to carry a gun. Maybe the department can give you some desk work. And then they can voluntarily surrender it. However, if I as a clinician am not equipped because my cultural competency is so deficient in understanding what guns mean to the person and what gun culture is, I'm not even able to have the reasonable conversation about what they can do. So that's why we do these things. And this is the first in a series of more educational experiences, hopefully not just for clinicians, but for the 2A community as well. I want the 2A community to have counseling demystified for it, and I'm just super stoked to be able to bring this class to not just to our mental health professionals, but to just regular old lay people who are not in our field, who just happen to be gun owners, and they're like, yeah, I want some counseling, but I've heard, and fill in the blank with what they've heard, and then I can say, okay, that's true, that part's sort of true, that's not true at all. Let's talk about this. I'm excited. I want to share my excitement with you. I want to tell you how it went, which was phenomenally well. I can't wait to do it again. This was the intro class, and in case you're still curious, I'm going to keep talking a little bit more, and then I'll cut it off, I swear. The idea is we take this intro course, which happened to be 3 hours, but then we build on it. So we go intro, and then we maybe go intermediate, and then we go advanced, and then we go full certificate course. Maybe there's like 4 or 5 levels of this course where we get deeper into detail. There's more experiences, more exposure, more range time, different subject matter experts from the firearms community come in and talk, and we cover different topics until ultimately we have a nice, solid group of clinicians who can say, I took the intro course and I feel like I'm competent to have a conversation with a gun owner now, or I've gotten all 4 or 5 installations of this continuing education course, and I have a full-blown certificate that says that I'm a safe person to go talk to if you're a gun owner. You don't have to fear me. I'm not going to judge you, and I get you. And we have certificates of competency for all sorts of things like couples counseling and trauma counseling, and so why not a certificate program for gun culture competency that basically hangs a shingle out and says, go ahead, gun owners, come here. You're safe talking to me. that in and of itself will be a great help. But I think broadly, if we can just become more cognizant of our own blind spots, more aware of our own fears, challenge those fears,